Good morning, everyone. Yesterday, I talked about all of the Conservative candidates except for Mr. Sloan. So I'm going to mention him right now. And the reason I didn't mention him yesterday is because I like his platform the best. I think that he's got the most common sense items. I think it's very important that we distance ourselves from the United Nations. There are a lot of things he says that I agree with. And because of all of that, I think that they will tell him to go find a party that more aligns with his views. Really, that's what I think. I don't think that he's got a chance to win because I don't think that the party will let him. I still think that Peter MacKay will win despite all of the polls that I've seen. Now, I think Leslyn Lewis is going to be a lot of people's second choice. I don't think that she'd win it in the first round, but if Peter MacKay doesn't take it in the first round, Leslyn Lewis takes it in the third or second, maybe the second. But the reason I don't think that I didn't mention Sloan yesterday is because I just think the party won't allow that to happen. Fundamentally, not that I think that he's not a bad candidate or that I think he's a bad candidate, not that I think he did a bad job running his campaign. He didn't. He did a good job running the campaign. The problem is it's slanted. The whole race is slanted, in my opinion, which is why I think Peter MacKay's going to win. So we'll find out later. I mean, maybe it's not slanted. Maybe it's not. Maybe Lisa Raitt walked in there and tidied up all the big mess, and she's running a legitimate race, and the whole thing is going to be above board, and the best candidate's going to win, and the Conservatives are going to come out strong. Hey, maybe crazier things have happened, right? They'll remove all of the infiltration and the terrible things about the party that have grown up over the last couple of years and be a shining beacon of freedom to Canadians. Or they'll elect Peter MacKay to the leadership in completely opposite to every poll that I've seen and most other polls except for the big corporate polls that have put Peter MacKay, 55%? As the last one I saw. And if that happens, I mean, that's expected, I think, right? I think Peter MacKay is a worse candidate than Scheer. I think Peter MacKay loses to Trudeau. I think O'Toole probably, it's a toss-up, but I think O'Toole probably loses to Trudeau. And I think Lewis beats him. And the only reason I think that that's true is because they can't use the same argument against Lewis that they would successfully use against O'Toole. Peter MacKay would lose it just because I think he would be that poor in the role. And I think he would be poor in the role of prime minister as well. But the reason I didn't mention Sloan is fundamentally because I don't think the party will let him win. That's it. Okay, moving into here's Mark Patrone, and he says the NDP need to understand the Trudeau government no longer has the moral authority to govern. So propping them up means the NDP is as ethically compromised as the Liberals. I think they are. I think they're ideologically aligned. I think they're as ethically compromised. I think they can look past bad deeds if the bad deeds mean they get to get their utopia that they're going to usher in. You know, when everybody's got universal basic income and no police because utopia's around and everybody's got enough and everything's perfect and nobody's using oil. I don't know how this utopia is brought about, by the way. Neither do they. But that's what they're going for. And they're willing to ignore the bad behavior as long as everybody's ideologically driven to the same ruinous end. That's fundamentally what I think. I think that they're all, or the people in the leadership, right? Maybe Charlie Angus is willing to bring down the government because that's the right thing to do. But I don't think the leadership in the NDP is. I don't think that the rank and file, I think that the rank and file would probably be willing to run an election again. But I don't think that you need about $40 million. You need about $40 million, and the NDP barely had enough last election to leverage the social media and run a reasonable leadership campaign for the NDP leader and for Jagmeet Singh and for the down ticket ones, right? And usually, like the Conservatives have a $30,000 purse for most EDAs in their membership because that's how strong their fundraising is. So they can put up websites, they can make sure that there's a strong showing. That's what the money goes to, right? Like it's expensive to run a political campaign. So it's expensive to run all of it. So when you don't have the money coming in, you look at your other options. That's what I think the NDP is doing. Okay, so, and the NDP, again, ideologically aligned with the current leaders, why not just support them, right? Just push them a little bit harder. That's how you use your balance of power. Push them a little bit harder for the policies you want, which is wealth tax and dental and pharmacology, right? That's their three things that they want. So, and Trudeau, he's willing to give that. I think he is. And I think that there are people who, again, not just in the political parties, but in the public. They're willing to look past the bad behavior if ideologically we can get to that ruinous utopia, right? Like that utopia is just around the corner. If we could just make it work, if those rich people could just pay more, yeah, those rich people, get them. It's stupid. It's tone deaf because it ignores history. Okay. Andrew Scheer gets asked, "Why is your party so racist?" And he says, "What?" At the end of it, he says, "Why does the CBC?" Because the CBC asks, I can't remember exactly what she asks. Hold on. Basically, she asks, "Why do you think there's more news about Kamala Harris than there is about Leslyn Lewis?" And he says, "Yeah, I'd really like to know the answer to that question. You're the CBC, you're the public broadcaster. Why do you guys broadcast American news all the time? What's going on with that? We've had a leadership race with a woman, a notable woman of color, and the CBC News has completely ignored it. What's up with that, CBC News?" And she says, "Yeah, okay, I guess I'll ask people about that. See you later," and moves on. So I'm going to show you this. This is probably a long clip. There's a couple of long clips at the beginning here, and I apologize. This is Chrystia Freeland getting on a box. Hold on.
Let's listen in live on Parliament Hill.
It's kind of funny. I'm just quick aside here. He's like, "Oh, you can get on this box here."
Okay.
Yeah, there you go. Chrystia Freeland jumps on a box.
There is the
there's a couple of long videos here, so I apologize about that. But I think it's important to go through what's going on, especially since we've got a prorogued parliament, right? Like there's lots of politicking going on, even though our government is not sitting. Okay, here's the exchange between Scheer and CBC.
And whether it's accurate or not, the perception does exist that the Conservative Party has failed to be a place where people of diverse backgrounds feel my voice can be heard, I can feel safe here, I can be a participant in the Conservative message and Conservative direction of this country. Why is the Conservative Party not able to break through that barrier?
Well, I just believe that's completely false. That is a mainstream media narrative that many of the major networks like to try to concoct. We've got a prime minister and Justin Trudeau, leader of the Liberal Party, who literally did blackface so many times that he can't remember. His government punished a public servant for criticizing the way the Liberals handled the blackface incident. We remember what he did to Ms. Cesar Chavin. So in our party, we believe in the fundamental equality of all human beings. We don't play the identity politics game. We believe that every single human being has inherent worth and value. It was John Diefenbaker who brought forward the Bill of Rights. It's Conservatives that believe that government must be there for all people. We don't reward the rich and powerful the way the Liberals do. So our party has a tremendous amount of grassroots support throughout every ethnic community in this country. We have a very diverse group of MPs. We had some of the most diverse slate of candidates. One of the leadership candidates herself is a black Canadian who is doing a tremendous job reflecting the diversity of this country. So I completely reject the mainstream media narrative that many of the networks are trying to create, but Canadians understand that it's our party that respects the fundamental value of every single human being, regardless of their race.
I totally hear that, sir, but allow me to push back a bit on that with the fact that you've brought up Leslyn Lewis being a black woman running for leadership of the party. If she were to win the leadership, she could very well become the prime minister of this country. So if you compare the amount of energy and momentum around her story, which arguably was very little, versus someone like Kamala Harris in the United States, there was so much energy around her identity and gaining momentum for the Democrats by putting her in a high-profile role. What's the disconnect here? Why was Kamala Harris lauded and celebrated, and one could argue Leslyn Lewis was somewhat forgotten in the conversation?
You know, that would be a great question for me to ask you and ask your network. Why you spend so much time talking about American politics and highlighting American candidates. Here we have a Canadian candidate. Here we have a black woman who's running for the leadership of the party. And as for the conversation around the energy around it, you can't look to the CBC to find an accurate reporting of what's going on in the Conservative Party of Canada. There's a tremendous amount of excitement. I think you're going to see Leslyn Lewis placed very, very strong in many, many regions. I'm not going to predict the outcome of the race, but she's generated a tremendous amount of excitement. When you look at what how she's tackled some of these issues based on conservative principles. There is, I'm not surprised that the mainstream media in Canada is downplaying her candidacy while focusing so much time and attention on American politics. It's always been frustrating for me as a Canadian taxpayer that the state broadcaster in this country, CBC, spends so much time and energy covering American politics, using taxpayers' money to cover politics in another country when they ignore and downplay many of the things happening here in Canada, especially within the conservative movement. So I'd love to hear an answer to that question from your own network.
All right. So we'll put that question to the public broadcaster for you. So
I don't think he's going to get an answer. I don't think they're going to be like, oh, dear Mr. Scheer. Not happening. But and sorry that I went long on that. I was going to stop. I was going to cut him off, but I thought the context matters, and the whole exchange is worth watching. So we watched it all. Scheer, where was that guy? Right? And again, I stand by what I said at the end of the show yesterday. Why would I trust the Conservatives now? We'll see what happens at the end of this leadership race, but it's going to be McKay. I'll be shocked if it's not McKay. Or if it's not, if McKay doesn't win in the first round, it might not be McKay after that, but I still think he's going to win. Here is, they're having a big rally on the 29th in August 29th in Ottawa. Apparently there are 17,000 from Quebec, 7,000 from Ontario, 4,000 to 5,000 flying in from around Canada. Man, I hope if you can go, that you go. I have a hard time with these protests. I watched the Yellow Vests show up for more than a year every Saturday to demand the resignation of Mr. Macron, and nothing happened. I've seen patriotic people get crushed by the boot of the police and riot police and telling them that what they're saying is racist or something to that effect. And meanwhile, a few people who get together for Black Lives Matter or large crowds who get together for Black Lives Matter during pandemic are celebrated in the press. And it's a really interesting situation, because I think that the way the press reports these protests matters. They spin them, right? Like they're used against you, right? It's like the United We Roll protest. They use the Faith Goldie and Andrew Scheer as ammunition to smear people, right? Like I don't think this is appropriate. And so I think that we really fundamentally need to re-examine the way we protest, because what's happening is we protest and then the news takes that and spins it into whatever they want. Really, it doesn't matter, right? They use somebody gets on a microphone or something happens negative around the area or whatever, and they use it to discredit the situation or discredit it. Somebody like Faith Goldie gets on a microphone and they say, oh, this is proof that they're XYZ, right? And they use whatever they can to tie the movement to something negative. Meanwhile, misreporting on the other side as well. Black Lives Matter protests are safe. You can't get COVID-19 if you do that. Meanwhile, opening schools is a terror. Okay, sure. You can have protests all summer, but opening schools is a problem. Get real. It's so inconsistent. But the consistent part about it is they will use your own. It's like Tai Chi. They will use your own energy against you, and they will make you regret it. And man, like I don't know what the counter to that is. I think that it's something that every Canadian can do, and something that we need to be able to do without risking property or like having people light a fire. I've heard people in Portland have been removing flags from their house because Antifa will light fires and do arson attacks, right? Because they're insane. So what that does is that prevents the ability for cohesion, right? You can't attract people to your group if you can't show allegiance to that group. But the problem as well now is that if you do that, you're risking friends and family, right? If you support Trump, man, they're being instructed. You have to tell those people that's hateful. You're not allowed to be hateful anymore, right? And the same with schools. It's no longer enough to be worried about yourself being kind and making choices that are kind about yourself. You have to encourage other people to discourage hate, right? Discourage hate, discourage whatever. And so it's very, very concerning. It's really, really concerning what's going on. And I think we need a better way to counter it. I think we need a better way to communicate that we are frustrated with the leadership, that we're frustrated with the government the way it is, and a way that can't be co-opted, a way that people can, again, show allegiance without putting a big target on their back, but I don't think that exists. Christia Freeland jumping on a box. There you go. Link will be in the description. Here's another long one. Man, I'm already at 15 minutes. I can't believe I'm at 15 minutes. I'm worried that I was recording at the beginning. So if the beginning of this show is me sitting around getting ready to record, I apologize. I just feel like that's too long for how long I've been talking. Anyway, regardless, I'm going to carry on. Prime Minister Trudeau yesterday, along with Doug Ford, announced 3M masks, and this person asked Trudeau about taxes. So this is essentially the question here. I'm just going to get me out of the way. It says, we took on debt so individual Canadians did not. Isn't government debt also debt accrued by individual Canadian taxpayer, right? Like government debt, there's only one purse, and that's the taxpayer purse. We don't have other money that we're pulling from, right? Under the table. So Trudeau says, well, I'm going to play it, and he uses Build Back Better, which is Joe Biden's thing, right? Build back better. This is a long one again. So, I mean, we're going to go long today, but yeah. And Joe Biden's quoting Jack Layton, right? Love is more powerful than hate. Hope is more powerful than fear. Light is more powerful than darkness. This is our moment. This is our mission. A couple of years ago. Anyway, here's Trudeau in that queued up clip. Here we go.
Of how you view debt. Isn't debt taken on by the government a euphemism for debt taken on by each and every Canadian taxpayer?
When this COVID crisis hit across the country, people were told to stay home. People were told to not go to work. And even though many people were able to turn or would have been able to turn to EI, we knew that millions of Canadians would be left without a source of income to pay their groceries, to pay their rent. That's why the federal government stepped up with the Canada Emergency Response Benefit to make sure that people could continue to support their families and put food on the table. If the federal government had not done that, people would have had to max out their credit cards. People would have had to borrow loans from the banks if they were lending them. They would have had to find ways to work under the table or work in unsafe conditions so that they could continue to feed their family. Well, that was unacceptable to us as an option. That's why we told people, stay home. Let's slow and stop the spread of this disease, and we will be there as a government to support you. We will be there to make sure you can continue to put food on the table, that every step of the way we will have Canadians back, and that is exactly what we did. Now, the federal government actually borrows at interest rates far lower than individuals on their credit cards or even provinces are able to. So the best way to ensure that Canadians could continue to support their families while they were hunkering down was to ensure that we could put money in their pockets, and we did. On top of that, the historically low costs of borrowing, the historically low interest rates meant that there is no question that this was the right thing to do, to be there to support Canadians concretely so we could stay safe and we could preserve our economy enough to be able to restart it as we are looking at now. But indeed, there are people out there who say we shouldn't have done that. And that's part of the choice that Canadians are going to be facing in the coming months. Our government is going to continue to do two things. Continue to stand for Canadians to be there and have people's back. And we're going to put in place the measures necessary, not just to return to the status quo, but to build back better.
So I'm just going to leave it there another 40 seconds. We're long. Sorry. Man, there's a lot to talk about in there, right? There's a lot to talk about in there. I talked to my friend who's an accountant. He said, basically, yeah, the Liberals are doing the right thing by borrowing and spending right now. Doing anything else is insane. I disagree, because I think that if you open up the economy, you don't need to spend this much. But I understand what he's saying. The money is cheap, so doing this is the right move if you look at it from an economic standpoint. The under the table unsafe working conditions, isn't that happening now? There are a lot of people who the curb doesn't apply to. There's a lot of people whose small businesses are not able to function, but big businesses are. I think, again, the draconian government crackdown is more problematic than the actual disease. I'll show you why in just a minute. We're going to get there. Actually, I can show you right now. Here's Tam talking about decriminalizing hard drugs to address the opiate crisis. So Dr. Tam is talking about decriminalizing hard drugs. And yet, Overdose deaths in Guelph are 14 this year, and this is July 14th. There's been more, I think, between July 14th and now. Here's the fatal cases in Guelph of COVID-19, 11. It is literally more deadly for drugs to be less criminal, for the current approach to continue is more deadly than COVID-19. Yet Dr. Tam is saying, you know what, we've got to double down. We have to double down right now, decriminalize drugs, and that'll solve the health crisis. Really? Really? You expect us to believe this? Yeah, and masks are mandatory and borders don't work. Close those borders. Masks are mandatory. Or masks don't work and borders don't work either. Masks are mandatory. Close those borders. I mean, it's just stupid. It's stupid at this point. And I was at an apple orchard yesterday, and it was really fun. And they said you have to wear your mask on the wagon ride. And we got on the wagon ride, and I didn't. My family said, no, I'm sorry about that. We're not going to wear a mask. We don't have a mask. It's not happening. And they said, oh, okay, no problem. And they carried on. And we were standing in line with a bunch of people. We were outside, so masks aren't mandatory. You can wear them if you want, but they're not mandatory. So nobody was wearing masks. I think there was one or two people with masks, just counting as I was walking through. But in what way would, like, I guess you're closer to people on the wagon ride, but still, I don't think that it is necessary, and it's very, very silly. We're outside. We're outside. People aren't sitting face to face on a wagon ride. We weren't close enough to people anyway. It was ridiculous. Anyway, I digress. The Build Back Better I find very, very interesting. Why are you aligning yourself with Democrats? Like, these people are insane. The Democrats in the United States are insane. And Joe Biden just looks fragile. This is from July 28th. And he walks on the stage here and he says some nonsense. Like, my grandfather used to call it broken glass. He would say words that all made sense. They were words, but they didn't make sense together. And Joe Biden tries to make a joke at the beginning of this, and it's just broken glass. It doesn't make any sense. Nobody listening could understand what he was talking about. So it's really weird hitching our wagon to the Democrats' talking points. It's really weird talking about how the government spending was the right move when closing the businesses has clearly not necessarily been the right move, especially considering the numbers, right? Considering the numbers. How in the world is this justified? How is this in the world is this continued to be justified? I don't think it is. I don't think it is at all. This is interesting. This is Kyle, what's his name? I can't remember. He's an MP from Dufferin-Caledon, Kyle Seaback, I guess. And Twitter won't play the video. I've tried a bunch of times and Twitter won't play the video. So I found the backup video. Here it is. He's just talking about prorogue, and I was going to play it, but I'm already long. So yeah, he's talking about prorogue and what we're trying to get to the bottom of. I haven't seen anything like this from my local MP. My local MP is not interested in actually talking about anything going on in the government. He's just interested. He puts up the spending, $37 billion more, but he doesn't talk about anything going on in his government or the absent insane leadership that we've got or whatever. He doesn't talk about anything like that. So this is nice to see MPs articulating what's going on in the government. We Charity, says Holly Doan, documents unsigned handwritten notes from June 29th phone call between we and feds. At Wernick, Rachel writes, scandal, concern, taking life of its own, social media, Aaron O'Toole, media requests, Blacklock's reporter. I wonder why Aaron Wernick's wondering about Aaron O'Toole, or excuse me, Rebecca Wernick? Rachel Wernick? Wernick is wondering about Aaron O'Toole's social media. It's interesting. It's weird. Why would she be interested in that? Venezuela's foreign ministry says Canada is causing his country's collapse to take control of its wealth. What? I saw this yesterday and I thought, man, I've got to include this in my show, but this is kind of at the end and I have no idea where this is coming from. Like, I don't think Canada can, at this point in time with our leadership, hatch a plan like that. I don't think that we're capable of leading our own country, never mind stealing Venezuela's wealth. Or taking control of Venezuela's wealth. We wouldn't know what to do. We'd be like dogs who caught the car they were chasing. We wouldn't know what to do with it. We don't know what to do with our own oil fields. It's not like we'd start sending oil from Venezuela to the Maritimes because, Irving's got that contract with Saudi Arabia, right? It's not, you don't want to renegotiate that. The Saudis don't like that, right? You don't want to get that Canadian oil on a pipeline. Nope. Saudis don't like that either, right? This is just I'm not going to go through this. I'm long already, and this is kind of, outside of what I usually, it's not outside of what I usually talk about, but we're long already. I could probably make this into a third video. Maxime Bernier is getting some press again. CBC Politics is saying People's Party of Canada paying leader Maxime Bernier $104,000 salary. Yeah, I mean, I think there's people who want me to be upset about this. Frank Vaughan's upset about this. I think that being the leader of a political party is a job that you should be paid for. So I'm not upset about that. What I'm upset about is that I haven't seen anything about the Constitution. So as soon as I see the Constitution, I'll be giving my opinion on what the Constitution says. I hope that it's worthwhile. I hope that it's worth the wait, because it's been a long wait, and it's frustrating for this long wait, because it feels like there's been 8 months of time that we could have been building and we haven't been, and I don't know why. But hey, man, I guess it's not my party. It's Mr. Bernier's. So there you go. It is what it is, and again, I don't begrudge the salary. I just begrudge the time it's taking and the lack of communication. Here's that little bit of drug overdose story that I was going to talk about, but worked in earlier. And Victoria Party host fined $2,300 under new coronavirus enforcement rules. So yeah, they're cracking down on parties. They're cracking down on gatherings and all sorts of 15 people. Oh my goodness! When officers returned, they found 15 people, and they told the host to end the party. Oh, terrible, awful. You terrible, awful people. $2,300 fine. I feel like the numbers do not bear this out. The numbers in Guelph, the numbers across Canada, the number of deaths, the number of people in ICU. The whole idea was to flatten the curve. We flattened the curve. Now what are we doing? What exactly is the rationale behind the mandatory masks? What's the rationale behind keeping businesses closed? What's the rationale behind all this? Because it seems like listening to public health is a losing strategy. It doesn't seem like it's a good strategy. It seems like very draconian rules for a medium bad flu season. So, I don't know. I have a hard time believing this government is just keeping people safe. And the more revelations, the more handwritten notes we see, the more information about the more games Trudeau plays with prorogation and all of that other stuff, rather than being held accountable, despite saying we're going to be transparent by default, right? Despite all the fancy language about transparency and openness, this government is much more closed off and not transparent, opaque, than the Harper government and any other government that I've seen in history, right? In Canadian history. It's concerning. And between using tricks at the Mark Norman level to hide people's names so that they don't show up in Freedom of Information requests, to just not answering questions, to just not answering questions in the House of Commons, right? Like, transparency is not the game they're playing. Transparency is a propaganda word that means something else to the liberals who say it than it does to the people who hear it, right? So, and that's by design. That's by design. They want you to hear what you want, right? Transparent, right? Sure. Except they don't behave that way at all. All right, that's enough out of me today. I promised myself I wasn't going to go this long. I was like, I've got to cut it down. I've got to cut it back. Sorry, everyone. Thanks for watching. Check out CanadaPoly.com. Check out CanadaReport.co. And have a wonderful, wonderful day.